I think my girlfriend is hiding something from me. I've been with my girlfriend, Eve, for close to a year now, and I gotta say, life has never been this good. She's beautiful, funny, supportive, the list goes on. All I could ever want. But a few weeks ago, I started noticing her acting strangely. I've begun to realize she's hiding something from me. It started one night when we were watching TV. "I'm just gonna get a snack," she said, getting up and going into the kitchen. I smiled at her and carried on watching TV. But a few moments later, I heard her whispering very faintly. Of course, it's not weird for people to talk to themselves, hell, I do it, but something about it was suspicious. She almost sounded apologetic. In fact, I'm almost certain I heard her whisper the words, "I'm sorry." I got up as quietly as I could and peeked through the door into the kitchen. The window was wide open, and she was retreating her hand as though she had just reached outside. "What are you doing?" I asked. She jumped and spun round to face me. "Oh, I was just opening the window," she replied, laughing nervously. I raised an eyebrow. "It's pouring it down out there," I said. "Oh, I know, I'm sorry, I have a headache and I'm feeling stuffy in here," she explained, then just smiled at me and opened the snack cupboard. I went over to the window and looked outside. It was dark, and I could see the tall trees of the woods beyond our garden swaying, battered by this relentless summer thunderstorm. I shut the window, frowning, and we both went back to watching TV. I decided not to give too much thought to this unusual event until the next day. It was Saturday, and I woke up at noon. Eve was already up, showering, so I went outside for a smoke. I stopped dead in my tracks when I saw that there were muddy footprints on the patio, below the kitchen window, that went striding off into the grass and heading toward the trees. So there was someone out there last night. I marched back inside and went upstairs to find Eve blow-drying her hair. "What the hell were you doing last night? Who were you talking to?" I demanded, perhaps a little more aggressively than I should have. She looked at me through the mirror with surprise. "What are you talking about? Why are there muddy footprints in our garden? I saw you reaching out of the window last night, and I heard you whispering. Who was there? What's going on?" I felt my heart beating intensely. I was mad, but also creeped out. Upon hearing my words, her face turned from confused to irritated, with a glimmer of panic. "I don't know what you're talking about." She turned around to face me. "If there are footprints, it's probably from when I put your boots on this morning to take the trash out. The kitchen bin was full." I thought for a moment. "Then why are the muddy footprints in the grass beelining to the damn woods?" I asked. Eve just shrugged. "I thought the neighbor's cat had gotten out again. It looked like it was running off into the trees, so I went after it, but I think it was just a hare," she explained. "Oh, right," I replied, unconvinced. "Sorry. Is she cheating on me with some jackass who tried to see her last night, I thought to myself. No, that's stupid. Surely, I thought, if there were someone else, he'd be smart enough not to show up at our home late at night and make such a fuss that I'd be sure to notice. Could it have been a plug? Was she buying drugs? My mind raced, but I decided to act cool whilst thinking of a plan to catch her out in whatever funny business she, or her mystery visitor, decided to conduct next. The next few days were pretty normal. I start and finish work earlier than her, so we don't see each other much until the evening. Normally I await her on our bed, ready for us to both de-stress after work. But only a few nights after the kitchen incident, anticipating Eve's arrival home, I got a text. "Hey babe, won't be home till 10. Katie and her BF had a fight and she wants me to see her. See you later, love you, love." Part of me wanted to believe this. Katie and Josh were going through a rough patch, I knew that. But part of me didn't believe it at all. I stared at the text for a while. She refused to let anyone have her location, even me, because of a stalky ex she once had, some guy who disappeared off the face of the earth 2 years ago after she threatened to report him to the police. I had respected this boundary of hers, but at this particular moment, it only frustrated me even more. Later on, my eyes pried themselves open to the sound of someone moving around. I had inadvertently fallen asleep earlier. Now, it was pitch black. The bedroom door creaked open, and Eve came in as quietly as she could. Pretending I was still asleep, I left my eyes open just a crack to observe her. I couldn't see much, but she undressed and got into bed next to me. She smelled earthy, like wet leaves. I glanced over at the digital clock on my bedside table. When I saw the time, I felt anger and panic sear through me. It was 4 a.m. Whatever the fuck she had been doing, I was certain she had not been with Katie the whole time. A few hours later when I got up for work, Eve was fast asleep next to me. Our room was bathed in milky, pre-dawn light. Once I had showered and dressed, I was about to leave the house when I noticed something on the floor in front of the porch. Dirt and undergrowth from the woods. Her boots were filthy. So she tracked it in last night. What the hell was she doing in the woods at 4 a.m.? I was angry, confused, and slightly afraid. I left, slamming the door in frustration. I needed to figure this out. Later, when I got home from work, I took advantage of my alone time and seized my opportunity to investigate further. I put on my boots and jacket, making my way into the woods to see what I could find. I couldn't shake a very persistent fear in the back of my mind, of what exactly, I don't know. But I put a little hunting knife in my pocket anyway. The storm had ceased overnight and the late afternoon sun was now sizzling down. Once I got to the bottom of our garden, I peered into the trees. It looked serene enough. Eve and I often go for walks in there, because it's such a nice spot. But I was still unnerved. I made my way in, damp foliage rustling under my step, and I looked around vigilantly. In the distance, I could see a large clearing. This was where we sometimes had picnics at midday on the weekend, because the noon sun shines nicely down into it. As I approached, I noticed that there was a circle of rocks with charred bits of wood and ash in the middle. It looked pretty fresh. What was she doing? I asked myself aloud. Having a fucking bonfire? Has she lost her mind? At the edge of the bonfire was a little piece of paper, half burnt, with writing on it. I picked it up. June 21 St. was written on it, followed by something that had succumbed to the fire. Beneath this were handwritten names. Eve's was there, followed by a bunch of other names, male and female, that I didn't recognize. As I went to pocket the paper, I noticed another name, one that I did recognize. Katie. June 21st was tomorrow. Was it an invite list? Were these people congregating here again tonight into the early hours of the 21st? Having s'mores without me? In June, no less. This was crazy. I had so many questions, but I was too curious to just ask Eve. I wanted to know exactly what was happening, so I decided that if she snuck away tomorrow night to come here again, I'd follow her and catch her in the act. As I turned to leave, I noticed something strange. One of the big trees at the foot of the clearing had a big symbol carved into it, a sun, with flickering rays. Beneath it some words were inscribed. Festum incipiat, it said. Latin, but I didn't know what it meant. Things were getting creepier by the minute. I whipped out my phone and took a photo. When I got back, I decided to look around the house, and Eve's belongings, for something to try and explain this. She had lots of notebooks and diaries, all filled with mundane work-related things. But in the wardrobe, in a shoe box, I found a leather-bound book I hadn't seen before. On the cover was a golden symbol, the same sun symbol I had seen earlier. Inside, on old, yellowed paper, the title page had the same Latin inscription I'd seen before, Festum incipiat. Reminded, I pulled out my phone and Google translated it. Let the feast begin. Huh. As I skimmed through the remaining pages, there were many different entries, dating back to 1976. Although all the handwriting was different, the language appeared to be the same, but I couldn't recognize it and neither could Google Translate. The most recent entries into the book were unmistakably written by Eve. What the fuck is going on? I muttered. I took several pictures of various entries, including Eve's, then I shut the book and put it back where I found it. The rest of the day dragged on eternally. That night, when Eve got home, I acted perfectly normal. But around 10 p.m., she got a text from Katie. Oh my God, she gasped. What is it? I asked. Josh and Katie had another fight. She said he hit her then bolted off. Jesus, what? I asked, sitting up eagerly. I don't know, but she wants me to go and be with her. I'm sorry babe, I have to go. No, it's fine. Go be with her. I replied. I knew it was all a lie. The texts were real, but I knew Katie was in on this whole freak show, whatever it was. Eve kissed me goodbye and hurried outside to the car, speeding off into the night. I shot up off the sofa and got dressed. If she was heading to the woods in the car to avoid my seeing her, she'd have to drive all the way around to the other side of it, park somewhere on a country lane, and follow the trail, which would take her about 30 minutes. That gave me plenty of time to get there first and hide out, phone camera at the ready. June 21st is the summer solstice, and we live in England, so it was still fairly light outside as I marched down to the woods. The sky was a dazzling orange. When I approached the clearing, the discarded bonfire still there, I stopped about 20 feet away. I found a brilliant tree, tall and gnarly with thick branches. It was the perfect tree to climb up. I was able to climb pretty high, and I nestled myself fairly comfortably on a thick branch. I tore away some of the foliage below me so I could see the clearing. I waited, and the night grew dark. I kept checking my phone. It became 11:30 p.m. The big, bright full moon of the summer solstice was glistening down, and it illuminated the clearing, making it look ghostly. It was almost midnight and I had been waiting about an hour and a half. I was ready to leave when I heard voices chattering from a distance. There were quite a few people approaching the clearing, it sounded like. I peered down and saw a group of people, including Eve and Katie and some other older men and women. They were all wearing some kind of weird protective gray clothing, as though they were dealing with chemicals. Altogether there were 11 of them. Oddly, I noticed, Eve, Katie and one other woman were carrying sacks that looked pretty heavy and were clanking loudly, while a few others were carrying shovels. One of the men prepared another fire whilst the others chatted amongst themselves. I was confused. But in mere moments, my confusion turned to horror. 2 men approached the rest of the group, and between them they were dragging a man by his legs who had been gagged and bound. His head was bloodied and I could hear him whimpering. The men threw their victim onto a tree stump and removed his gag. I squinted my eyes and realized who it was. They had taken Josh. "Please don't kill me," he begged. "Katie, please, whatever you're doing, please stop." Tears were streaming down his face, glistening in the light of the fire and moon. "Silence, little lamb," Katie said. I couldn't keep my eyes off Eve. She was watching, as were the others, with a sinister smirk on her face. She, Katie, and the other woman put their sacks on the ground. All 13 of them gathered round the fire in a circle. Josh was wriggling, trying to get out of the ropes, but it was no use. In unison, everyone chanted the same thing, Festum incipiat. I looked on in bewilderment. Katie reached into one of the sacks and pulled out a huge, curved blade. She walked calmly over to Josh, who began screaming. His scream was cut short as she swung the blade into his neck. He made a stomach-turning gurgle, collapsing from his knelt position onto the ground. Katie put her foot on his chest and yanked the knife out. Dark blood squirted out in pulses. She hacked again, and again, until his head came off. The others cheered, and Katie grabbed his severed head by the hair and threw it into the fire. "It's all right, little lamb," she said. She then chanted something in a language I couldn't understand. "Nima," chanted the others. I almost vomited. In my shock and disbelief, I had forgotten about my phone. My phone. I needed to call the police. I rummaged through my pocket and pulled it out, but I was trembling too much. I dropped it, and it clattered loudly between branches before hitting the ground with a thud. They all turned. "What was that?" one of the men said. "I don't know," said a woman. "Probably a squirrel. Go and look." "Eve, you said this was the perfect spot." The first man spat. "It is," Eve assured. "No one comes here, especially not at this time." The man made his way over and searched the ground beneath my tree. He looked up, but he must not have seen me or found my phone, because he returned to the campfire empty-handed. "Eve," began Katie. My ears perked up. "Why don't you do the honors whilst Jacob sets up the spit?" Eve smiled, and she reached into one of the sacks, pulling out a different knife, a huge, machete-like blade. One of the men, Jacob, grinned and took a bunch of metal parts out. "No. I thought star. Please no. Please no, asterisk." Eve approached Josh's body, and I looked away, covering my ears. I started crying. It poured out of me, and I fought back sobs, only allowing silent convulsions. When I looked back, they were all stood, and an elderly woman who had previously remained hooded stepped forward. "Well done," she said. "Our sacrifice will be rewarded. Our bodies have been nourished." Everyone stood around the fire, holding hands, and chanted a prayer in the language I didn't know. I looked away again as they just laughed and talked like they were friends round a campfire, their mouths full. My stomach eventually turned and I vomited into my inner jacket pocket, so as to make as little noise as possible. I didn't know what time it was, but eventually, they had finished. One man extinguished the fire with a fire extinguisher he had pulled out of one of the sacks, while Steve, Katie and the others started digging with the shovels. After a while, they had dug an extremely deep hole. Katie fished Josh's charred head out of the fire and threw it in. A few others used the shovels to scrape what was left in the fireplace into the hole as well, and then what little remained of Josh went in. I shut my eyes again. When I finally dared to open them, it was light. Birds twittered around me. Everyone had gone. The clearing looked normal, save for the big patch of fresh dirt. Soon enough, that would blend in with the rest of the undergrowth. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. The air around me was electric with fear. I threw off my jacket, descending the tree carefully. I looked around for my phone to call the police. But I couldn't find it. I kept searching frantically, but it was nowhere. Shit. Shit. That man must have found it. I scrambled over into the clearing, and a crow squawked at me, perched atop a branch. It was then that I saw the little note pinned to the same tree, written in Eve's handwriting. "We saw you.